Have you ever found yourself in a relationship that just doesn't feel right, yet you can't seem to walk away? Maybe you've prayed about it, asked God for clarity, and searched for answers, but deep down, something keeps nagging at you. It's that quiet, unsettling feeling that won't go away, no matter how hard you try to convince yourself that everything will work out. If you're experiencing this, I want you to know you're not alone. Many people struggle with knowing whether a relationship is from God or if it's something they're forcing to fit into their lives. I get it. Letting go of someone you care about is one of the hardest things to do. We don't enter relationships expecting them to fall apart. We invest time, emotions, and sometimes even years, hoping that things will get better. We tell ourselves that if we just try harder, pray more, or change certain things about ourselves, maybe the relationship will improve. But what if I told you that sometimes the struggle isn't a test of endurance? It's a clear sign that God is telling you to walk away. God is a God of love, peace, and clarity. When He brings someone into your life, it won't come with confusion, endless anxiety, or a constant feeling of unease. He is not the author of disorder, and He won't lead you into something that consistently drains you, steals your joy, or distances you from Him. Yet too often, we ignore His voice because we don't want to face the possibility that the person we've grown attached to may not be part of His plan for us. Maybe you're staying in this relationship because you're afraid of being alone. Maybe you've convinced yourself that this is as good as it gets, or you're holding on to the hope that they will change. But let me ask you, at what cost? Your peace? Your joy? Your relationship with God? If being with someone is pulling you away from the person God has called you to be, it's time to ask yourself if this is really love or just attachment to what's familiar. God often speaks to us in ways we don't expect. Sometimes, He whispers through that gut feeling we keep ignoring. Other times, He allows circumstances to unfold in ways that push us toward the truth, no matter how much we resist. He might be using that constant lack of peace, those repeated red flags, or even the wise counsel of people around you to show you that this isn't where you belong. I want you to hear this. When God removes something from your life, it's never to hurt you. It's to protect you. He knows what's ahead, and He sees the things you can't see yet. Trusting Him when it comes to relationships isn't always easy, but I promise you, it's worth it. You don't want to waste years trying to force something that was never meant to be, only to look back and realize that God was trying to rescue you all along. So today, let's talk about 5 clear signs that God does not want you with someone. These aren't just random observations. They're biblical principles backed by wisdom and experience. If you recognize any of these signs in your own relationship, I encourage you to lean in, pray, and most importantly, be willing to listen. Because when God is guiding you, He's not leading you away from something good. He's leading you towards something better. One of the clearest ways God speaks to us about a relationship is through peace, or the absence of it. When you're with the right person, there's a deep sense of security, trust, and clarity. It doesn't mean the relationship is perfect or that there won't be challenges, but there's an underlying confidence that you're where you're supposed to be. However, when God is trying to warn you that this isn't the right relationship, that peace will be replaced with an unshakable feeling of unease, you might not even be able to explain it. Maybe everything looks good on the surface. The person checks all the boxes. Your friends and family like them, and things should make sense. But something inside you just doesn't sit right. You pray about it, but instead of feeling reassured, you feel more uncertain. Every time you think about the future with this person, There's a knot in your stomach or an underlying anxiety you can't shake. That's not normal. That's not love. That's God's way of nudging you, telling you that something is off. God's peace is not just a feeling, it's a confirmation. The Bible says in Philippians 4:7 that His peace surpasses all understanding, meaning that even when things don't make sense on the outside, His peace is there to guide us. If you're constantly feeling restless, if you're losing sleep over this relationship, if your heart is always heavy and burdened, that's a sign that God is trying to get your attention. He doesn't use fear or confusion to lead His children. The enemy does. God's way is peace, and if that peace is absent, it's time to ask yourself why. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're just overthinking, that the doubts will go away with time. But deep down, you know the truth. You've been trying to silence that inner voice, distracting yourself with busyness, telling yourself that every relationship has its struggles. And while that's true, there's a difference between working through challenges with someone who is meant for you and forcing something that was never meant to be. God will never force you to let go, but He will make it uncomfortable to stay. The longer you ignore that discomfort, the more it will grow. That unease will turn into tension, stress, and eventually, it will begin to affect your spiritual life. You'll find yourself struggling to pray, feeling distant from God, and questioning everything. That's because God's presence is incompatible with disorder and chaos. And if He's not giving you peace about this relationship, it's because He has something better for you. The second sign is even more serious. When the relationship is pulling you away from God instead of drawing you closer to Him. Love should make you stronger in your faith, not weaker. A relationship that is truly from God will inspire you to seek Him more, to grow spiritually, and to become a better person. But if you've noticed that since being with this person, your walk with God has become weaker, that's a major red flag. Maybe before this relationship you were passionate about reading the Bible, spending time in prayer, and being active in your faith. But now, you feel distracted, distant, and spiritually empty. Maybe this person doesn't respect your beliefs, or they make you feel uncomfortable about your convictions. Perhaps they constantly push boundaries, convincing you to compromise your values little by little. It might not even be intentional, but slowly, without realizing it, you start to drift away from God. Sin is deceptive. It doesn't always come in obvious ways. Sometimes it sneaks in through small compromises, tiny justifications that seem harmless at first. You tell yourself it's just one time, it's not a big deal, God will understand. But before you know it, you're no longer the person you used to be. Your standards have lowered, your convictions have weakened, and you don't recognize yourself anymore. That's how the enemy works. He doesn't destroy your faith overnight. He erodes it little by little until one day, you wake up and realize you're far from God. 2 Corinthians 6:14 warns us not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. This isn't just about dating someone who doesn't share your faith. It's about being connected to someone who is not going in the same spiritual direction as you. If your relationship is making you feel guilty rather than spiritually fulfilled, if you have to hide certain things or constantly justify your choices, that's not love. That's bondage. God will never bless a relationship that pulls you away from Him. He is a jealous God, and He will not compete for your heart. If you have to choose between keeping your relationship and keeping your faith strong, that choice is already made for you. No person is worth losing your connection with God. And if this relationship is causing you to neglect your spiritual life, then you already have your answer. It's not from Him. I know this isn't easy to hear. I know it's painful to realize that someone you care about might not be God's best for you. But what's even more painful is staying in something that is damaging your soul. The longer you hold on to what God is trying to remove, the harder it will be to break free. It's time to be honest with yourself. Is this relationship bringing you closer to God or taking you further away? Because if the answer is the latter, then you already know what needs to be done. God often speaks to us through warnings, but we don't always want to listen. When a relationship is not meant for you, He will show you red flags, sometimes repeatedly, until you either pay attention or suffer the consequences of ignoring them. The problem is that many of us choose to overlook these warnings because we don't want to face the reality that this relationship is not from God. Maybe you've seen things that made you uncomfortable, things that don't align with the kind of love God desires for you, but instead of walking away, you make excuses. You tell yourself, no one is perfect. Everyone has flaws. And while that's true, there's a difference between working through normal challenges and ignoring clear signs that something is wrong. Maybe you've noticed a pattern of dishonesty, but you convince yourself that they'll change. Maybe they treat you with disrespect, but you brush it off, saying they just had a bad day. Maybe they've hurt you repeatedly, but you hold on, hoping that things will be different next time. But let me ask you, how many warnings does God have to give you before you finally believe Him? Samson ignored the warnings. Time and time again, Delilah tested his love, deceived him, and showed him exactly who she was. But instead of walking away, he stayed, convinced that his own strength could handle the situation. And in the end, it cost him everything. God was warning him, but he didn't listen. How many of us are doing the same thing, holding on to someone who has shown us again and again that they are not meant for us? When God places red flags in front of you, He is not being cruel. He is being merciful. He is trying to save you from a deeper heartbreak, from wasted years, from pain that could have been avoided. The reason it feels hard to walk away isn't because this person is the right one for you. It's because your heart is attached to something God never intended you to keep. Ignoring red flags doesn't make them disappear. It just means you're choosing to delay the inevitable pain that will come later. If there are patterns of toxic behavior, controlling tendencies, emotional manipulation, or a lack of respect, those are not small issues. Those are signs that this is not God's best for you. And if you've been praying for clarity, wondering if this is the relationship God wants for you, take an honest look. Has He already shown you the answer through the red flags you've been avoiding? When a relationship is from God, it will produce good fruit. It won't be perfect, but it will be filled with love, kindness, patience, and respect. It will make you a better person. It will encourage your faith. It will align with the things God has called you to be. But when a relationship is not from Him, it will drain you. It will create more stress than joy, more conflict than peace. It will pull you away from who God created you to be. Galatians 5:22-23 talks about the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. A relationship that is aligned with God will reflect these qualities. Not perfectly, because we are all human, but consistently. When two people are both seeking God and walking in His will, their relationship will reflect His nature. There will be love that is patient and kind, not controlling and selfish. There will be peace, not constant confusion and turmoil. There will be mutual respect and understanding, not cycles of hurt and apologies that never lead to real change. If your relationship is filled with more chaos than peace, more frustration than growth, more arguments than understanding, you have to ask yourself, what kind of fruit is this producing in my life? Because God does not plant seeds of destruction. He does not call you into something that consistently robs you of joy, drains your spirit, and leaves you feeling emotionally exhausted. If you are constantly walking on eggshells, if love feels like a battlefield instead of a safe place, that is not the love God designed for you. Love should not feel like a constant struggle to prove your worth. It should not make you question your value or leave you feeling empty. The love that God intends for you will not require you to lose yourself just to make it work. It will not force you to compromise who you are or sacrifice your peace in exchange for companionship. Many people stay in toxic relationships because they confuse intensity with love. They mistake passion for purpose. They hold on to something broken, believing that if they just love harder, things will change. But love is not meant to be a battlefield. The right relationship will not leave you emotionally drained and spiritually disconnected. It will reflect God's goodness, not your worst fears. If you are in a relationship that is bearing bad fruit, it's time to ask yourself if this is what God truly wants for you. Because the longer you stay in something unhealthy, the more it will take from you. And the more it takes from you, the harder it will be to recognize what true, godly love actually looks like. God's plan for your life includes love that is full of grace, peace, and strength. Not love that constantly leaves you feeling unworthy and exhausted. If the fruit of this relationship is rotten, no amount of effort will turn it into something God never intended it to be. There is a moment in every unhealthy relationship when God makes it clear that it's time to let go. Maybe He has shown you through a lack of peace, through signs and red flags, through the way this relationship has pulled you away from Him. Maybe He has even spoken directly to your heart, whispering that this is not His plan for you. And yet, you resist. You hold on, hoping that things will change, that the timing will get better, that this person will somehow become what you need them to be. But the longer you fight what God is telling you, the harder it will become. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to let go is because they have already invested so much. You look at the time, the emotions, the sacrifices you have made, and the idea of walking away feels unbearable. You tell yourself that if you just hold on a little longer, if you just pray a little harder, maybe God will change His mind. Maybe He will suddenly make this person the right one for you. But God doesn't work like that. He is not in the business of forcing things to fit when they were never meant to. There is a story in the Bible that reflects this struggle perfectly. In Genesis 19, God tells Lot and his family to leave Sodom because He is about to destroy it. But He gives them one command: do not look back. As they flee, Lot's wife cannot resist the temptation to turn around. She looks back at the life she is leaving, and in that moment, she turns into a pillar of salt. She was so attached to what God was trying to remove from her life that she couldn't fully walk into what He had ahead of her. How many of us are doing the same thing? God is calling us forward, but we keep looking back. We keep trying to hold on to something He is asking us to leave behind. And as a result, we stay stuck, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, unable to move into the blessings He has for us, because we are too afraid to let go of what is familiar. Letting go is one of the hardest things you will ever do, but it is also one of the most necessary. When God asks you to release something, He is not trying to hurt you. He is trying to protect you. He is trying to free you from a relationship that is limiting your growth, your joy, and your purpose. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what lies ahead. And if he is asking you to let go, it's because he has something far greater waiting for you. The pain of letting go is temporary, but the pain of staying in the wrong relationship will only deepen over time. You can either surrender now and trust that God has something better, or you can continue to fight against his will and eventually learn the hard way. Either way, his plan will unfold. The choice is whether you will embrace it now or delay the inevitable. God's love for you is too great to allow you to settle for less than his best. He is not asking you to let go because he wants you to be alone. He is asking you to let go so that you can finally make room for the person who is truly meant for you. But as long as you keep holding on to something that is not from him, you are blocking the very blessing he is trying to give you. So, take a deep breath. Acknowledge what you already know in your heart. God has been speaking to you, guiding you, and showing you the truth. It's time to listen. It's time to trust him more than you trust your emotions. It's time to believe that his plans are greater than your own. Because when you finally surrender, when you finally let go, you will look back one day and realize that what felt like a loss was actually a divine rescue. And in that moment, you will thank God for loving you enough to say, "This is not for you. I have something better." So drop an amen if you believe in God and pass this on to someone who needs it. God bless.